So as Travis mentioned, one thing that we do know is that web original content just tends to perform better. But it's not always feasible to produce it. It's not always in budget. So what we wanted to do was find out, are there strategies or are there enhancements that you can make to really make repurposed TV content work better in the online environment? So what we did was we actually recruited 2 sets of nationally representative respondents, and we showed them 2 versions of an ad. So the first set of respondents got just the original, plain pre-roll version of the repurposed video. And then the second set of respondents actually got that same ad, but with interactive elements added. And what we did was we created a mock-up in-context environment where both ads were fully functional, the click-throughs were fully functional, all interactive content was fully functional. And after the respondents were given a chance to really explore and watch these ads, we asked both sets of respondents the same set of creative evaluation questions, which really come from our background in copy testing, and we have a substantial norms base on. So one of the first benefits that we really saw of adding interactivity to repurposed video is that it just gives you an opportunity to increase the brand's presence on the actual ad. It actually gives you a physical location where you can add additional branding and just brand imagery that, as Travis mentioned, it really is vital to strong performance in the online environment. What we find is that because the online environment is just so cluttered and distracting, and the video ad actually has to compete with additional content on the same page, having a constant logo presence really is vital to strong performance. And this is typically a place where repurposed video tends to underperform. And that's just because this type of constant brand presence just isn't always necessary in the TV environment. And what we found was through our test that the version of the ad that actually had that interactive element added outperformed not only the original version of the video, but actually also outperformed our digital video norms for branding power. So definitely a good strategy, especially when you're trying to raise awareness, for instance. Another benefit of interactivity that we've seen throughout the years is that it can actually captivate consumers' attention and really increase their engagement with an ad. And what we found through this test was that just the visual presence alone of these types of interactive elements could actually increase consumer engagement with the repurposed video, even if they don't actually interact with the ad. And we generally see that interaction rates aren't that high, so this is definitely really important. And what we saw was that even though interaction rates within our test were pretty low and very comparable to the online environment, about 4%, what we see in the live environment is about 3% for these types of interactive ads. We still saw that respondents that were shown the interactive version of the ad were much more likely to say that they would take an action after seeing it. So one of the things that stood out was that, for instance, respondents were much more likely to say that they'd speak to family and friends about the brand after seeing the interactive version of the ad, even though only a very small percentage actually interacted. And because these types of interactive elements can increase the branding power of an ad and also increase consumers' engagement with it, what we saw was that for lower consideration items like a CPG brand, adding interactive elements to a repurposed video can actually increase its persuasive power. This type of improvement isn't going to be likely for a high consideration item like automotive or financial service. And that's really just because, to be persuasive, an ad for higher consideration items really has to be able to communicate an extensive amount of information and build an emotional bond. And it's just unlikely that adding interactivity alone would help improve an ad's ability to do this. So that's actually why we did a second portion of this test. So in the second portion of this test, we wanted to see whether there were enhancements that could actually improve an ad's ability to not only captivate consumers' attention, but maintain their attention. This is what's really needed to communicate that extensive information, to build those emotional bonds that are necessary to improve the persuasive power of an ad for higher consideration items, but just in general. So what we did was again, just like the interactivity test, we tested 2 versions of the same ads, but this time the enhanced version actually had visual enhancements. And that's the version on the left there. And what the visual enhancements were was it actually had a synced companion banner that almost worked like a second video screen that was synced right to the main video player. And it also had some visual elements that actually expanded beyond the frame of the video creative. And again, just like the interactivity test, we recruited 2 sets of nationally representative respondents and asked them the same set of creative evaluation questions. after they were showed both ads. So what we found was that by really making the ad the center of attention on the page and eliminating those distractions that tend to hinder the performance of repurposed video, the visually enhanced ads were actually able to have more stopping power, so the ability to attract attention. But more importantly, they were also able to improve the active involvement of respondents with that ad. And that really corresponds to an ad's ability to maintain consumers' attention in the online environment. And again, what we find is that repurposed video tends to really underperform on this. And that really comes down to the fact that TV advertising doesn't have to compete with additional ads or content on the same screen, where in the online environment you do have to do that. So TV advertisement just generally isn't designed to do this type of hard work. Okay. And now what we found through these visual enhancements is that because they make the ads more visually captivating, because they help attract attention, because they help maintain attention, they actually improved respondents' response to the ad, and people found them more involving, more unique, more interesting. And again, these are all factors that really contribute to being able to maintain consumers' attention in the online environment and being able to communicate that extended information that's needed to be persuasive. But one thing to keep in mind is that you do run a slight risk of causing irritation or annoyance by making an ad like this so visually captivating, by making it take over the entire screen. So we do definitely have some recommendations just in terms of what you can do to avoid these adverse effects. And first of all, it just starts with good creative. You shouldn't consider this as a chance to improve the performance of bad creative. This should really be seen as an opportunity to make creative that worked well on TV work equally well in the online environment. Secondly, you want to make sure you're using targeting techniques. As Travis mentioned, targeting, demo targeting especially, is really important in the online environment, especially if you're using repurposed TV. That advertisement is just designed for a specific demo target. And especially when you make it so visually captivating, you want to make sure you're hitting a relevant audience, somebody who has an interest in the product. Otherwise, you do run that risk of causing annoyance. And then lastly, we would definitely recommend using frequency capping. This is because it's taking over your full video screen. Even if you have an interest in the product, if an ad like this takes over your screen multiple times, if you're seeing it over and over again, you're probably still going to be annoyed by it. And this actually lines up really well with what we found from our normative database, just in terms of what a good strategy for being persuasive in the online environment is. What we found was that frequency, high frequency, doesn't necessarily contribute to being persuasive. So this actually lines up very well, and we'd recommend an approach where you're really maximizing your reach and not your frequency.
Looking through all the work that we did with dynamic logic, just a few things that really jumped out at me. One is that you can make repurposed TV creative work really well by using some of the elements that we talked about. Interactive elements are absolutely a good thing to add across the board for those who are going to interact, and then even for those who aren't. And then finally, there's really good reasons to run both a 15 and a 30. So it just depends on the objective of the campaign. If it's a more complex message, lower funnel metrics, a 30 might be a very good choice. If you're trying to achieve breakthrough between your TV creative and your online creative, and you want the higher video completion rate, 15s are a great choice.